Ava Thompson, a 9-year-old girl, with bright eyes and a hopeful smile, stepped onto the yellow school bus. For the first time in her new neighborhood, her mother Emily waved goodbye, her heart filled with dreams of a better future for their family. But as the bus door closed, neither of them could have imagined the dark journey ahead. Mew Johnson, the silver-haired bus driver, who seemed as gentle as a grandfather, harbored a terrible secret behind his friendly smile. That dark truth was about to cast a shadow over Ava's life in ways her parents could never foresee. As weeks passed, Emily's motherly instincts began to tell her that something was terribly wrong. In this predominantly white neighborhood, her growing concerns about Metru Johnson, a long-standing and respected member of the community, felt impossible to voice without fear of suspicion or, worse, being ignored. But what unspeakable actions were happening on that bus? And how would Emily's determination to protect daughter become the key to uncovering the community's shocking secrets? What were those terrifying secrets? Before we begin this courageous story of justice, leave us a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this shocking story, do not forget to subscribe to our channel so you do not miss any of our other gripping tales. The Thompson family, Jack, Emily, and their 9-year-old daughter Ava, moved into their new neighborhood. On a beautiful sunny day, the moving truck rumbled away from the quiet street, leaving the three of them standing on the green lawn in front of their 2-story home. It was an upscale neighborhood with houses close together, red-tiled roofs and neatly trimmed gardens. Most of the residents were white, and the Thompsons might be the only family of color in the entire area. Eva stood on the lawn, her bright eyes shimmering as she took in the unfamiliar sights. She had curly black hair and a radiant smile, reflecting the excitement of youth. As she faced a new world, Emily, her mother, gently placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, her eyes a mixture of nervousness and joy, as she watched her only daughter, who seemed so eager. "How do you feel, sweetheart? Do you like it here?" Emily asked, her voice gentle, though she could not hide a hint of anxiety. Ava tilted her head, thinking for a moment before answering. "It's different from the old place, but I like that tree, Mom. Can we hang a swing on it?" She pointed to the large oak tree, casting a shadow over one corner of the yard. Emily chuckled, the tension on her face seeming to ease. "Maybe let's finish unpacking first." Just then Jack emerged from the house, sweat bleeding on his forehead from hauling the last of the boxes inside. He exhaled, wiped his brow and smiled at his wife and daughter. "All done finally. Let's order pizza and take a break. How's that sound?" The family walked into their new home together. Inside, the living room was empty. The polished wooden floors, reflecting the sunlight, streaming through the large windows. They had not unpacked much yet. Boxes lay scattered everywhere. The smell of new wood and fresh paint lingered in the air. As they entered, they caught glimpses of curious neighbors peeking through their windows. Though no one said anything, both Jack and Emily could feel the watchful eyes. It was the look of strangers, unfamiliar with the presence of a family, that looked different from everyone else. In this mostly white neighborhood, that evening the Thompson families sat on the floor. As they had not yet set up any furniture, they ate pizza out of a box, using it as a makeshift table. Jack lifted a slice and said with a hopeful voice, "Here's to new beginnings for our family." Emily and Ava raised their pizza slices, gently tapping them against Jack's in a playful toast. The three of them laughed as the crusts made a light, clinking sound. They sat there, eating pizza and talking about the future, about the plans and hopes they wanted to come true in this new place. Emily smiled at Ava, her face glowing with happiness, as she talked about how she would not have to travel for work anymore and could work from home designing fashion, her passion. "I'll be able to work from home now, right here in this room." Jack beamed at his wife. "I know you'll do great at the new company," he said confidently. Ava, her mouth still full of pizza, asked excitedly, "What about me at the new school? Will I make friends?" Emily and Jack exchanged glances, their smiles fading slightly. Emily quickly reassured her daughter, "Of course you'll make friends, Ava. You're smart, sweet, and funny. The other kids will love you." Jack added lovingly, "Just be yourself, and that's all that matters." The night passed with laughter and hope, but beneath all the optimistic words, both Jack and Emily could feel a sense of unease. They knew that moving to this new neighborhood, where they were the only family of color, might bring unforeseen challenges. The late-night conversations about choosing this neighborhood had always centered on the benefits for Ava: a better school, a safer environment. But would they really be accepted here? Emily sat on the sofa, gazing at the room still cluttered with boxes, her heart filled with hope, yet not entirely free from worry. "We're doing this forever," Jack had said many times. "We want her to have a better life, with the best opportunities." But now, looking at the unfamiliar room, Emily could not help but wonder if this decision had been the right one. She worried about Ava and their future in a community where they might not be fully accepted. Emily could not stop thinking about those concerns. Throughout the night the next morning, the early morning light filtered through the curtains. The early morning light filtered through the curtains. She woke up with a feeling of nervous anticipation. Today was the day Ava would go to her new school, a major step for the whole family. She wore her favorite yellow dress and carried her new backpack, full of excitement. but unable to hide a bit of anxiety. Jack and Emily stood with Ava in front of the house. Under the large oak tree Ava had loved from the first day, the early morning air was fresh. But Emily's heart felt heavy. She could not shake the worry about whether her daughter would fit in and make friends in this new environment. She even wondered if their family would be accepted by the neighbors and the community. When the familiar yellow school bus arrived, Ava gripped her backpack tightly, looking up with wide emotional eyes. The bus door creaked open, and the driver, Mr. Johnson, was an older man with silver hair and a face that seemed friendly, but did not show much emotion. His eyes briefly swept over Ava, then back to Jack and Emily, a flash of surprise at their presence, before his expression turned into a polite but cold smile. "Good morning," Mr. Johnson said, his voice flat and not particularly warm. "This must be Ava, right?" Emily tried to smile, feeling a bit uneasy at his distant attitude. "Yes, that's right. This is Ava. Today is her first day at school." Mr. Johnson nodded, his gaze lingering on Ava. "Welcome aboard, Ava. I'm Mr. Johnson, your bus driver." Ava glanced at her parents one last time. Seeking reassurance, Emily knelt down, gently smoothing her daughter's hair, and softly said, "You'll do great, Ava. Just be yourself. And if anything makes you uncomfortable, tell your teacher or us right away, okay?" Jack knelt too, taking his daughter's hand, his voice gentle yet encouraging. "You'll be fine, Ava. You're a brave girl, remember? Just be you, and that's enough." Ava nodded, then took a deep breath and stepped onto the bus. As the door closed behind her, Emily and Jack stood on the curb, watching the bus roll away. Through the window they saw Ava find a seat, while some of the children on the bus turned to look at her. With curious eyes, some smiled, but there were also cold, unreadable stares that made Emily feel uneasy. The bus disappeared around the corner, and the quiet returned. Jack took Emily's hand, trying to reassure her, but they both felt a deep unease. "She'll be okay," Jack said, his voice filled with confidence. But Emily could hear the doubt in her husband's words. She knew he was just as worried as she was, all day. Emily tried to bury herself in the task of unpacking, but her mind kept racing with the question, is Ava okay? Will she make new friends? And most importantly, will people treat her fairly? That afternoon, when it was time for the bus to return, Emily stood by the door, her heart racing with anxiety. She hoped Ava would step off the bus with a bright smile and excited stories about her first day. But worry crept back as the familiar yellow bus appeared in the distance, and the door slowly opened. The bus door opened slowly, and Ava stepped off, her backpack swaying with each small step. Emily smiled as she saw her daughter approaching, hoping to see a radiant face. after her first day at the new school. But immediately she sensed something was wrong. Ava walked more slowly. Her eyes seemed to avoid meeting her mother's. She did not rush to share her day, as Emily had hoped. Emily knelt down and hugged her daughter, sensing the hesitation in Ava's gaze. "How was your first day, honey? Did you meet any new friends?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but unable to hide the growing worry in her heart. Ava smiled faintly, a weak smile that lacked the excitement Emily had expected. "I met a few kids," Ava said softly. "The teacher was nice, but..." Her voice trailed off, her eyes looking down at the ground, as if she did not want to continue. Emily immediately picked up on this hesitation, and a feeling of dread rose in her chest. "But what, sweetie?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice gentle, so as not to worry her daughter further. Ava bit her lip, glancing at her mother before whispering, "Me Johnson, the bus driver, he's not very nice." Ava stopped, clearly reluctant to say more, but her awkwardness and avoiding gaze made Emily feel the gravity of the situation. "What did he do?" Emily asked carefully, her voice soft and cautious. She did not want to push, but her instincts told her something was wrong. "He said some mean things," Ava replied, her eyes still not meeting her mother's. "He said things that made me feel bad when I got on the bus." Emily's heart began to race. Ava's words sounded simple, but she could not shake the rising anxiety in her chest. "What did he say, sweetie? What kinds of rude things?" Ava just shook her head and quickly changed the subject. "It's nothing, Mom. Can I go play in the yard?" Emily watched as Ava quickly headed outside, her heart full of doubt. She did not want to press her daughter further, but it was clear that Ava was not comfortable talking about this. Normally an energetic child, Ava's unusual silence only deepened Emily's concern. She decided to let the matter rest for now, but she could not stop thinking that something was not right. That evening the family sat down for dinner. Jack had returned from a long day of work, and they shared a simple meal in their new, still disorganized home. Ava talked about school, her new friends and the playground at school. With the usual enthusiasm, she described the kids she had met and some of the games they played. But when Emily subtly brought up Men Johnson again, Ava quickly grew uncomfortable and changed the subject. "Did Mer Johnson say or do anything today?" Emily asked, trying to keep her tone casual, but her eyes never left Ava's face. Ava lowered her head, fidgeting with her napkin, and muttered, "It's nothing, Mom." Then she quickly shifted the conversation to ask Jack about his new job, clearly trying to avoid her mother's question. Emily glanced at Jack across the table, trying to suppress the rising anxiety in her chest. She knew she should not push Ava, but the way her daughter abruptly changed the topic and looked uneasy made it impossible to ignore. Ava had always been an open child, quick to share everything about her day, but now her hesitation and silence only made Emily more worried. After Ava had gone to bed, Emily decided to talk to Jack about what had happened during the day. As they sat on the couch in the living room, she recounted Ava's comments about Mr. Johnson. Ava said the bus driver seems mean and rude. I feel like something is wrong, she said, her voice filled with concern. Jack leaned back on the couch, sighing, and spoke in a calm voice, trying to reassure his wife. Maybe he's just an old man with a tough attitude. Some people are not the friendliest, but that does not mean it's anything serious. I do not think we need to worry too much. Emily was silent for a moment, looking at Jack with uncertainty. She knew her husband was trying to comfort her, but it did not ease the heavy feeling in her heart. I know, but Ava does not seem like herself. She does not want to talk about it, and that worries me more, she said, her voice growing more thoughtful. Jack smiled lightly, trying to be gentle. You might be overreacting. Kids can be sensitive to change. She's just adjusting to the new environment. Emily nodded, but she was not at ease. She knew Jack just wanted to calm her, but a mother's intuition would not let her easily dismiss the situation. She decided not to push over, but it was clear that something was wrong, and she would have to find a way to understand what was really happening. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily could not sleep. She tossed and turned, recalling the worried look on Ava's face when Mr. Johnson was mentioned. What could have made her daughter so uneasy? She wondered if she should talk more with Ava, or if she was just being too sensitive. She looked over at Jack, who had already fallen asleep, and felt alone in her worries. She did not want to create tension in the family, but she could not ignore the feelings building up inside her. Whether Jack was right or not, Emily had a clear sense that this was not just a normal adjustment. These small, unusual signs were making her increasingly anxious. Emily sighed, closing her eyes, but her mind would not stop racing. She knew that sooner or later she would have to find out the truth behind Ava's strange behavior and Mr. Johnson's actions. The next morning, as dawn broke, Emily still could not shake the feeling of worry that had haunted her. All night she woke up early, looking over at Jack, who was still sound asleep beside her, and decided that she could not just sit and wait to see if things would get better on their own. The strange signs Ava had shown could not be ignored any longer, even if Jack had tried to convince her that it was just the usual changes a child goes through. When starting at a new school, Emily walked downstairs, feeling the stillness of the house in the early hours, but inside her there was no calm. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, her eyes gazing out the window. She knew she had to do something, that she could not let these worries cloud the love and protection she felt for her daughter. She decided that she would keep a closer watch on things to better understand what was really going on. When Jack came downstairs, he found Emily sitting quietly in front of her cup of coffee, her eyes filled with a determination he had not seen so clearly before. "What do you think about me following Ava's school bus today?" Emily asked, her voice calm but resolute. Jack looked at her with surprise. "Following the bus, are you that worried?" "I know it might sound like I'm overreacting," Emily admitted, "but cannot you see Ava has changed? She's not as open as she used to be, and I cannot just wait around for things to naturally get better." Jack sighed, sensing his wife's determination. "I understand that you're worried about Ava, but is it really necessary? She's probably just adjusting to the new life." Emily shook her head, her eyes shining with a resolve even Jack could not ignore. "You're right. She is adjusting to the new environment. But that does not explain why Ava is so worried about Mitra Johnson. If you do not want to help me with this, I'll follow on my own. I need to make sure she's safe." Jack was silent for a moment, then finally nodded, realizing that he could not change his wife's mind. "All right, but be careful. Do not make this bigger than it needs to be, unless there's something really wrong." After making breakfast for Ava, Emily tried to keep the mood light, but her mind was full of plans for the day ahead. When the sound of the school bus echoed from the street, she kissed Ava goodbye as usual and watched her board the bus. But this time, as the yellow bus drove away from their street, Emily quickly got into her car, ready to follow from a distance. She kept far enough back not to be noticed, but her eyes never left the bus in front of her. Her heart raced with each stop, as the bus picked up more students. Through the bus windows, she could see Ava sitting in the back, quiet and not talking to anyone. This only made Emily worry more. The more she watched, the more she sensed something was not right. At each stop, the other kids quickly got on the bus, but Ava was always the last one to board. Emily could not help but wonder if Johnson had arranged it that way. As the bus rolled on, Emily noticed how Johnson watched Ava through the rear view mirror. Every time she got on, his gaze unsettling. When the bus finally arrived at the school, Emily parked in a hidden spot, watching the students as they stepped off the bus. Mira Johnson seems quite friendly with the other children, helping them off the bus and saying a few cheerful words. But when it was Ava's turn, his demeanor changed. He simply nodded and quickly touched her shoulder. Saying nothing, Ava seemed eager to get off the bus as fast as she could. A feeling of dread swelled in Emily's chest. She could not deny that something was wrong with how Ma Johnson treated Ava. But what was it? Why did not Ava want to tell her everything? She wondered if she should confront him directly, but decided it was not the right time. Driving home, Emily's mind raced with what she had just seen. She wondered if she should tell Jack about what she had done that day. He had been worried she was exaggerating the situation. But now, Emily knew that something very real was happening. She had to keep investigating, had to find out what was making her daughter change. When she got home, Emily sat quietly in the kitchen, staring at her cold coffee. She knew she could not wait any longer. If no one else saw the problem, she would have to be the one to uncover the truth, no matter how hard it might be. That day passed slowly, and when the afternoon came, Emily was once again watching for the bus to bring Ava home. This time, Ava stepped off the bus with a tired look on her face, lacking the usual excitement. "How was everything today, sweetie?" Emily asked, trying not to reveal her worry. Ava just shrugged. "It was fine, Mom," she replied, not offering anything more. Emily did not push the conversation further, but inside she was now sure of one thing. Something was wrong with Ma Johnson and the daily bus rides. She knew she could not let this go on any longer. She needed to find a way to protect her daughter. The next day, as the clock struck 4 p.m., Emily began to feel restless as she stood by the window, waiting for Ava to return from school. She had been following the bus for a few days now, and each time she saw things that made her worry. But today, as the clock ticked past 4:15 p.m. and still no sign of the familiar yellow bus, her worry began to turn into panic. She kept looking out at the road, trying to catch any glimpse of the bus approaching. Normally Ava would already be home by now, sharing stories of her day, even if she was hesitant or shy. But today the street was eerily quiet, and the bus was nowhere to be seen. Emily paced back and forth in the living room, her phone in hand, debating whether to call the school or Jack. Finally, unable to wait any longer, she called the school. "Ava Thompson, 3rd grade. I'm her mother. My daughter has not come home, and I'm really worried. The school bus has not arrived." Emily's voice trembled slightly as she tried to stay calm. While speaking to the school's receptionist, the person on the other end responded in a sympathetic but serious tone. "All of our buses have completed their routes and returned to the depot. If your daughter is not home, I suggest you contact the police immediately." Those words made Emily's heart stop. She had never imagined the situation could become this serious. The receptionist's advice, though logical, sent her into a state of panic. She immediately called Jack. "Jack, Ava has not come home," she said, her voice shaking. "I just called the school, and they said the bus finished its route. But she's not here. I do not know what to do. I'm really scared, Jack." Jack was silent for a few seconds. Then he spoke, his voice clearly tense. "I'm coming home right now. Call the police, Emily. You were right, something's wrong." Jack's words confirmed the fears Emily had been trying to suppress. She shakily dialed 911, trying to keep her voice steady. As she reported Ava missing, on the other end a police officer reassured her that they would send someone over immediately. As she waited for the police to arrive, Emily sat in the living room, clutching her phone tightly, her mind racing with the worst possible images. Had Edmund Johnson done something? He had shown strange behavior toward Ava many times, and now she could not stop herself from thinking that perhaps he had done something far worse. Her mind kept flashing to images of Ava, her happy little girl, now lost between uncertainty and fear. When Jack arrived home, the police had just arrived as well. The couple explained the situation to the two officers, one a middle-aged man and the other a young woman. "Our daughter usually comes home at 4, but today she has not shown up. The school said the bus completed its route, but we have no idea why Ava has not returned. We'll contact the driver and check the bus's route." Immediately, the officer said, jotting down notes quickly. But just as they were about to leave, the front door suddenly opened. Emily and Jack turned around, and there standing in the doorway was Ava, her face pale, her uniform dirty and her eyes filled with tears. Ava Emily leapt up, rushing to hug her daughter. Relief flooded her, but only for a moment. As she realized something was terribly wrong, Ava trembled in her mother's arms, but did not cry out loud. Her eyes stared at the floor, not daring to look at her parents. Jack came closer, kneeling down to look at his daughter. "Ava, where were you? Why are you so late?" Ava's voice quivered as she spoke. Barely audible, he did it again. "The driver left me in the middle of the road." Emily froze her daughter's words, hitting her like a punch to the gut. "Me Johnson did what? What did he do to you?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. "He left me in the middle of the road, not near our house. I walked for a long time. I was so scared, Mom," Ava said through sobs. Jack and Emily looked at each other, horror etched in their eyes. Now there was no doubt something terrible had happened, and they knew they had to act immediately. Emily felt like her world was collapsing around her as she heard Eva's trembling words. She held her daughter tightly in her arms, feeling the little girl's body shake, her own heart filled with pain and panic. Jack stood next to them, his fists clenched, his knuckles white with rage. Mira Johnson had left Ava, stranded in the middle of the road again. They could not believe something so awful could happen to their daughter. The male officer, Officer Thompson, lowered his voice, his face becoming more serious. As he listened to Ava's story, "Ava," he said gently, kneeling to her level, "can you tell us more about what happened today? This is very important, so we can understand the situation." Ava nodded slowly, sobbing for a few more seconds, before trying to calm down enough to continue. "Meter Johnson has done this before. He does not like me every time I get on the bus. He says mean things, telling me I do not belong here." Her voice grew smaller and smaller, but the hurt and fear were clear in every word she said. Emily went quiet, trying to hold back the tears welling up in her eyes. "What did he say to you, Ava?" she asked softly, her hand gently stroking her daughter's messy hair. Even though her heart was in turmoil, Ava hesitated, her eyes still cast downward. "He said people like us should not live here. He called me bad names. I do not understand all of them, but I know they were bad words." She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears again. As she recalled those painful moments, "He said I'll never have friends, that I do not belong at this school." Emily squeezed her daughter's hand, her heart filled with anger and sorrow. She could not believe that an adult could do something so cruel to a child. Jack stood still, his whole body tense, his eyes staring at the floor, unsure how to hold back his emotions. Officer Thompson sighed softly, quickly jotting down notes in his notebook. "These are very serious allegations," he said, looking up at Emily and Jack. "We'll need to open an immediate investigation into Min Johnson and verify all of this information." But Ava was not done. She took another deep breath and continued, her voice shaking even more as she spoke about the most recent incident. "Today he told me to get off the bus, but not near our house like before. He stopped the bus in a strange place where nobody was, and said if I did not get off, he'd make me regret it. I was so scared. I did not know what to do, so I got off." Ava began to cry harder, her small body shaking in Emily's arms. The room fell silent. Emily and Jack could not believe what they had just heard. How could someone treat a child so horribly? Not only the cruel racist words, but also the dangerous act of leaving their daughter in an unsafe situation. "We need to take immediate action," Officer Brooks, the female officer, said, her voice firm but compassionate. "We'll issue a temporary hold on Meter Johnson while we investigate. This is an extremely serious matter." Emily felt a surge of both anger and fear, but she knew the most important thing now was to protect Ava and ensure that the person responsible for this would never harm her daughter again. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect our daughter," Jack said, his voice deep and resolute. "Ava, you were very brave to tell us what happened," Officer Brooks said, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Now we'll make sure he cannot hurt you or anyone else anymore." As the police left to begin their formal investigation, Emily and Jack sat quietly next to Ava. She was exhausted, lying in her mother's arms, Without saying another word, Emily looked down at her daughter, her heart breaking for what she had endured in silence. "We were too slow to see it," Emily whispered, looking at Jack with tear-filled eyes. "I should have listened to Ava from the beginning." "This is not your fault," Jack responded, his voice heavy with guilt. "We'll make this right, we'll protect her." Both of them knew the road ahead would not be easy. They would have to face not only their daughter's pain, but also the harsh reality of how someone could treat an innocent child this way, just because of the color of her skin. But what they knew for certain was that they would fight to the end to protect Ava, and make sure Mia Johnson could never harm anyone else again. Emily and Jack both knew that the fight to protect Ava had only just begun. The next day, they decided to go to the school together to meet with the administration and get to the bottom of the situation. They could not let this end with just a police report. The school needed to take serious action to ensure the safety of all the students, not just their daughter. On the way to the school, Emily could not stop thinking about how long Ava had endured this before finally speaking up. The thought filled her with both pain and anger. When they arrived, they were led into the office of Principal Davis, a middle-aged man with a calm but stern demeanor. "Mia and Mrs. Thompson," Principal Davis said as they sat down, "I've heard about what happened to your daughter. It's truly unfortunate, and we will be cooperating with the police." During the investigation, Emily tried to keep calm, but her anger was ready to boil over. "Unfortunate," she repeated, her voice cold. "Johnson has abandoned my daughter in the middle of the road. Twice spewed racist remarks. And you call that unfortunate? This is not just about cooperating with the police. Mr. Davis, he needs to be suspended immediately. And the school needs to take responsibility for ensuring no student ever has to go through this." Principal Davis was silent for a few seconds, clearly not expecting such a strong reaction from Emily. Jack stared at the principal, his eyes full of determination. "We're not here just to report this. We want to know what the school's plan is to make sure this does not happen again. What are you going to do about Mia Johnson?" Principal Davis cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure. "We've asked Mia Johnson to take a temporary leave while the investigation is conducted. However, for a final conclusion, we need more information from the police and any witnesses." Emily could not believe what she was hearing. "Witnesses? My daughter has told you everything, and you still need more witnesses to decide whether he should be suspended." Principal Davis hesitated before responding. "We have to follow procedure, Miss Thompson. This cannot be handled solely based on one individual statement. We understand this is a difficult situation, but we must be cautious. Jack stood up, no longer able to contain his frustration. My daughter has been mistreated because of her race. And you're telling us you need more witnesses? Emily could feel the anger rising in her husband. But before Jack could say more, the office door opened. Another Mother Mayoress Williams, one of the few families of color in the area, walked in. "I'm sorry, I do not have an appointment, but I need to talk about this," she said, her voice tense. Both Emily and Jack turned to look at Ms. Williams, and she quickly continued, "My daughter also rides that bus. She's told me about how Mew Johnson mistreated her. I did not speak up before, because I was afraid it would affect her. But after hearing about Eva, I cannot stay silent any longer." Principal Davis's eyes flickered between Emily and Miss Williams. He was clearly taken aback by the appearance of another concerned parent, but now he could not deny the problem any longer. The truth was becoming clear, and the allegations against Mew Johnson were not just coming from one child. "I see the situation is more serious than I realized," Principal Davis said, his voice softening. "I will suspend Mew Johnson immediately and begin an internal investigation. I'll also be reaching out to other families to ensure that no similar incidents have occurred. And I apologize for allowing this issue to go on for as long as it has." Emily sighed with relief, but the tension inside her did not fully fade. This was only part of the battle. She and Jack knew that Mew Johnson being suspended would not heal the wounds Ava had endured right away. They had a long way to go to make sure their daughter would never face such discrimination again. As they left the principal's office, Emily felt a small glimmer of hope. At least they had made an important step forward. However, she could not help but wonder if the community around them was really ready to face the deeper issues. Mrs. Williams' words had shown that the problem was not just confined to their family. On the way home, even though Mew Johnson had been suspended, Emily and Jack could not shake the feeling that this fight was far from over. A suspension was only the first step. They knew full well that it was not just Mew Johnson, but the system and environment around them that had allowed this problem to grow. Now they needed to protect Ava, not just from one person but from the deep-seated prejudice in this new community. As soon as they got home, Emily and Jack contacted a lawyer. They could not let this end with Mew Johnson's suspension. They needed to be clear legal action to seek justice for Ava and any other children hurt by him. They met with their lawyer, a strong and determined woman named Miss Carter, who immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "Will file a lawsuit not only against Mew Johnson, but also against the school system for failing to properly supervise and address this issue earlier," Miss Carter said, her voice filled with determination. "We cannot allow someone like Mew Johnson to have the chance to harm any more children. As they prepared for the legal battle, Emily and Jack also noticed that Ava's story began to spread throughout the community. At first, they worried that they would be isolated and criticized for standing up for justice. But instead of the backlash they expected, more families began to speak up in support, especially families of color who had silently suffered for fear of social pressure. Parent meetings and community gatherings became tense. Some families in the area supported Emily and Jack, agreeing that they needed to be a broader change in the school system and the community to ensure that acts of racial discrimination like this would never happen again. However, there were also those who strongly opposed, claiming they were making a big deal out of nothing and disrupting the peace of the neighborhood. At one particularly tense community meeting, Emily stood up to speak in front of a room full of people. This is not just a personal issue between Ava and Millard Johnson. This is a problem for our entire community. How can we build a safe environment for our children when acts of racism like this are ignored or downplayed? If we do not act now, we're teaching our children that hatred and discrimination can be tolerated. The room was silent for a long moment. A few people bowed their heads, as if Emily's words had touched them. But there were others, especially some older white neighbors, who could not hide their discomfort. One of them, Mivan Jamieson, stood up and said, "We've lived here for decades without any issues. Now, because of one incident, you want to change everything. This is not the community's fault. This is a personal issue." Jack, unable to hold back his frustration, responded, "The community's fault is in tolerating this behavior without anyone standing up against it. This is not just about our family or Ava. This is about all of us. If we really want our children to grow up in a fair and safe environment." Jack's words left the room in a heavy silence. No one could deny that he was right. If one child was being treated unfairly because of her race, then there was no guarantee that other children would not face the same. After the meeting, Emily and Jack felt exhausted, but also a little hopeful. They were no longer alone. Other families, including white ones in the area, had come forward to express their support. Many people were beginning to realize that the problem was not just about Metri Johnson, but about the system and the community's indifference in addressing issues of racism. As time passed, their lawsuit began to make progress. Mida Johnson was charged not only by the Thompson family, but by several other families who had come forward after hearing Eva's story. Evidence from testimonies and witnesses was gathered, and the case was taken to the local court. On the day of the trial, Emily felt a weight on her heart. She saw Ma Johnson, the man her daughter had faced every day on the bus, now standing in court to answer for his actions. But alongside that, The presence of families from the community, especially those who had supported her, brought her strength. She knew that this fight was not just for Ava, but for all the other children in the community, and even for future generations. As Emily sat in the courtroom, watching Midra Johnson stand trial, she could not help but feel that a part of the burden on her heart had lifted. The long battle they had fought over the past several months was coming to a close, and her family was no longer alone. The community had changed. Not everyone supported them. But what mattered most was that the voices of injustice had been heard, and the truth had been exposed. The lawsuit concluded with a ruling in favor of the Thompson family. Midra Johnson was convicted for his racist behavior and endangering the safety of children. He was sentenced to prison and permanently barred from working with children. But more importantly, the case opened the door for broader reforms in the community and the school system. After the trial, Emily and Jack stood outside the courtroom, surrounded by families who had supported them, especially families of color who had suffered in silence for far too long. Ms. Carter, their lawyer, approached them with a gentle smile. "We won, but this journey is just beginning. Ensuring that these changes are made will be a long-term challenge." Emily nodded, feeling relieved, but also understanding Ms. Carter's warning. "I know, but at least we've made a start. The most important thing is that Ava and the other children do not have to live in fear anymore." In the weeks that followed, the school began implementing serious reforms. The bus system was upgraded with security cameras, and a diversity and inclusion training program was introduced for all school staff. Even more encouraging was the formation of a parent group dedicated to creating a safe and discrimination-free learning environment for all students. By the time spring arrived, the atmosphere in the neighborhood felt lighter, and Ava slowly regained her joy in everyday life. She started opening up more, returning to the cheerful, lively child that Emily and Jack had always known. The sleepless nights of worry began to fade, and every morning, Ava left the house with a smile on her face, confident and no longer afraid. One beautiful sunny afternoon, as Emily stood on the porch, watching Ava board the bus with a new driver, she felt a deep sense of hope. The new bus driver was a woman of color, with a warm and friendly smile that welcomed all the children. Ava turned back to wave at Emily before finding her seat with her new friends. Jack stepped out to stand beside Emily, wrapping an arm around her. "We did it," he said softly, his eyes filled with pride and understanding. "We protected Ava and made a change." Emily leaned into Jack's shoulder, taking a deep breath of the fresh spring air. "Yes," she whispered, watching the bus drive away. "But what's even better is that we helped change this community. The changes were small but meaningful. Families who had once felt isolated by racism now had a voice. The school had created an environment where every child, regardless of background or skin color, was respected and safe. Emily Lee knew that the fight would never fully end. But what they had done was a big step forward for Eva's future and for the community as a whole. In the months that followed, Emily and Jack continued to attend parent meetings and community events, helping to build a stronger foundation for diversity and inclusion. They knew that despite their victory, the important thing was to keep those changes alive for future generations. One evening, as Emily sat on the couch with Ava, the little girl rested her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "Mom, I'm happy I spoke up. I'm not scared to go to school anymore." Emily looked down at her daughter, her heart swelling with pride. "You were so brave, Ava. You helped make a change for yourself and for so many others. I'm so proud of you." Ava smiled, her eyes shining. "I'm proud of us too, Mom." Emily hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the strength and determination in her little girl's heart. They had weathered the storm, and now the Thompson family knew that their future was brighter than ever. The battle was over, but the hope and spirit of unity would remain. The Thompson family story is a testament to the power of courage and unity. When we stand up against injustice, we not only protect our loved ones, but also help create change for an entire community. If you found this story meaningful, make sure to hit the subscribe button to help spread positive messages, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories.